Stathopoulos and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible podcast, Grow, Scale, Master.
An energetic approach to drive progress, master skills, build strengths and put the strategy back into rapid business and personal success.
Backed by real-world experience in rapid scaling to playing the long-term game of business, it's the story of all the lessons learned on the journey to mastery.
Be inspired, renew your energy and chase the future with Grow, Scale, Master.
Con, there is just something about the power of a dream and climbing towards a peak. And at different stages, you will find yourself on a plateau. And a plateau is not a bad place to be if you're there by choice, but it's a very dangerous place to be if you're not there by choice and you don't know how to get off it. How important is it, like this whole conversation in terms of the power of dreaming and also to being in that position that you can recognize whether or not you're climbing towards a peak and you've got clarity of a goal, or whether or not you've hit a plateau and there's not much that's motivating you now?
I think plateaus sometimes are necessary. If you kind of look like you want to go and, climb Mount Everest, you need to go from base camp to Camp A to Camp B to Camp A, back to B, from B to C and C to B and so forth. And I think plateaus sometimes are a necessary part of that journey. It depends on what type of plateau though. Is it R&R, so you need to take a break, you need to refill your cup, you need to recharge your battery? Or is it a plateau because you don't have a plan on how you're going to get from Camp A to Camp B? And I think that the important thing is fall in love with the destination and the journey, but the journey is actually what's going to help you get to the destination, if that makes sense. So I'm a dreamer. I dream big. I think big. I live big in terms of in my mind, not in terms of my real life. I drive an old Ford truck, as you know. But the key to this is what's the plan that's going to help you get to, your peak?
Yeah, the interesting conversation is that I think an early mentor of mine had said to me, "Oh, Josh, you got to stop viewing it as transactions and you got to start viewing it as transformational relationships."
Yeah, love that.
And I was in a position that I was starting to do more transactions and one thing was going to the next. And I'm not saying it was easy, but it wasn't as hard as it was initially. So I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing. I do this, I get that. I do this, I get that. I do this, I get that. I've got my 5 opens every Saturday. Life's great. And then I started to think, okay, great. And he said, go and read some Jim Collins stuff. And I'd read this whole thing about role model approach. And it's that whole idea is that literally, how do I now help others to grow? And that was the transformative conversation, because in terms of getting off a plateau and climbing towards a new peak, I found an unending peak to climb. Because all of a sudden you could start to feel reward and recognition and all of those things, which was completely non-financial, but very, very fulfilling at a soul level and at an individual level, because you could actually start to see why people were actually wanting to make that decision to go and get growth. And, and sometimes I think that literally if you have a set of metrics, once you've maxed out all of those metrics, you can kind of feel like you're there. And a really good example of that is that when people are looking at the revenue metric and they go, hey, I want to try to get to $1 million in fees.
Sure.
And once they write $1 million,
they stop.
All of the energy and all of the effort and all of the drive and all the desire to want to do that $1 million, well, that's done. But do I want to write 2? Nah, it's not really my thing. And the interesting conversation about that is to say, okay, great, but now change the metric. Okay, great. So that's looking at top line revenue versus expenses, better known as profit statement. Then, okay, great. What does it actually look like in terms of your balance sheet? So what sort of assets have you got? You minus all your liabilities, what's left over? And what you realize that then that's a great leveler, because you're like, oh, geez, I'm nowhere.com. And I'll never ever forget that first moment I went to go and get a home loan as a 19-year-old. And literally I got all of the assets and we added all the liabilities. I mean, I was one line. And the true net wealth number was literally 3 digits before the decimal point. I was like, oh, shit. Yeah. And then that's what I then learned. Okay, great. There's a different game to go and play. And I think that there's a difference between having a firm eye on the future and also being able to enjoy the present. And learning to the metrics between both of those.
I think it's spot on. We spoke about the levels of life and growth, and you get from level 1 to level 2 and whatnot. But I think for me, when I look at this in terms of business, where I see a lot of people get off track or really on track is when they've got a life plan that mirrors their business plan. So what do you want your life to look like? Year 1, year 3, year 5, year 10, and then how does your business plan reflect what you actually want in life? And real estate's the perfect vehicle for life-changing transformation. So I see that once you've got that really rock solid plan about how you want your life to live, doesn't matter whether you write $1 million or $2 million GCI, it matters how you live. So net profit, asset growth, you're looking at experiences, what you can do with your family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I see the biggest transformation in agents occurs, because they've got a motivation that's beyond the real estate recognition. I wrote $1 million. Who cares if you wrote $1 million? What life have you built, and what are you providing for the people that you care about the most? And that's where I see the biggest transformation occur.
Yeah, the other thing is that then you have moments where lights turn on. I changed my superannuation the other day to a company called Vanguard.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was having a quick look at that, they had this little thing for investing for kids. And I was thinking about, okay, great, nieces, nephews, all those things. And I quick look at it and was like, if you put away this amount every single week, literally in a Vanguard savings account for your kids, which they go and invest in some ETFs and some shares, this is what it will be worth by the time they get to 21. And it was like blow away, because you kind of look at that and you're like, why do we keep on buying 1 million toys? Why don't we just put that $50 or that $100 away for their Christmas present or their birthday present, and instead go and put that into an investment account? And it starts to get you think a lot differently about, like every single time that you feel that you've made it, it is the perfect time to start out again. And this is kind of like that basking moment of glory. And I think that sometimes people get it when they go to speak at a conference, and literally I'm going to go and speak at that conference, and for a whole 4 months, their whole life is about how they're going to speak at that conference. It's going to be that moment of glory, and there's going to be 4,000 people in the audience. And what I've noticed is that literally in the following 30 days, they often write their worst fees ever.
Yeah.
Because they fell in love with the idea of who they had become, without realizing that the person that they've become is the one who has to get on the phones and do more deals and get in front of more people. How important is that when you start to have that conversation around saying, starting out again just after that moment that you've arrived?
I don't think you've ever arrived, mate, to be frank. I think you're right. You've got moments, so these micro moments in your career where, you speak at ARIC, or you've hit $1 million in GCI, or whatever it might be. But they're those levels in life that challenge you to be able to grow to that next place. And so I kind of look at it and I go, celebrate the success. Fall in love with the journey, not the destination, because you might think that you're flying to Thailand, but you might end up in Paris. Okay, and that's the beauty about what we do, is that it can be life-changing and transformational. However, you need to keep setting the bar high enough for you, because you are capable of more, you deserve more, and you can do more. It depends on your plan. Now, what I'm saying with more, it's not necessarily go from $1 million in fees to $2 million in fees. It could be, I'm going to write $500,000 in GCI. I'm going to drop my kids off every day at school. I'm going to have breakfast with my wife or my husband, and then I'm going to pick my kids up at 3:00, and that is my life. And I can have the best real estate business on planet Earth. And every school holidays we go camping. Fantastic. Design the game of life that you want to win.
And it's interesting. It's like, someone gets married and then they think they don't have to work on the relationship.
All the work starts then.
Yeah, or the whole conversation of, you know what, I built my team, so now I don't have to prospect.
Absolutely not.
And so, it's exactly the same thing. And so is there a safe way to celebrate success, though, and use it to still stay humble in the pursuit of greatness?
Yeah, absolutely there is. And I think that, if you're running a team, it's all about team goals and, those stretch targets. What would it look like if we did, if we got to this point? And I think, life is all about, life is all about celebration. Okay. And the thing that we do is, we're 6 to 7 days a week in this industry. We're always on. And I think if you don't have those moments of milestones, then what ends up happening is you can get fatigue. Okay. And I see it with teams, and I see it with agents, and I see it with business owners. The key thing for you is to be able to work out what's important to you. I mean, there was a lady that spoke at ARIC a couple of years ago, and she spoke about going in 8-week bursts and having 2 weeks off. So she could have 2 4-week auction campaigns. She'd list in between. Her team would get those ready. She'd go away for 2 weeks, refill her cup, and come back. That's one way of celebrating success. The other one might be, being able to put some money aside for a charity or a not-for-profit, or to be able to do something in your community. Or it might be that when I can achieve this will unlock this next level of whatever that might look like. So I think it's critically important that you celebrate those success, but you don't rest on your laurels, because success can change. It depends on what success means to the individual.
One of the things that I've witnessed you do is that after the big Super Saturday event, you guys go out for a really lovely lunch, and you take everyone there. And that's an incredible feeling, because we've put all of that energy and all of that motion in. And what I always say to people is that, like, there's no problem with celebrating the success, but how quickly do you get back to it? And I think that, like, there was a great example. I happened to be in Alexander Phillips's office on a particular day, and on that day, he'd just sold the most expensive house of his career. And while I was there, like, literally the deal had just gone unconditional at that moment. And I remember that literally he hung up the phone, he turned to Prue and he said, hey, we've just done this deal. It's actually unconditional. And there was like a moment of like a yes. And then, you know what happened? He then picked up the phone and then he then started to ring other sellers in the street to let them know about the sale price.
Yeah.
And I was like, so when are you going to celebrate that? He goes, well, tonight we're going to go for a lovely dinner with my wife and, you know, we're going to have a great conversation. That'll be lovely, but we'll be home by 8 o'clock and back into bed, you know, to get ready for an early day tomorrow. And it started to get me to realize that there is nothing wrong with symbolism. So if you want to buy a new car, great, but do it with cash.
Yeah.
If you want to be in a position that you'd love to go and buy a lovely watch or a great ring or a great handbag or whatever it is that you want, no problems. But do that with delayed gratification because you actually saved the money to get there rather than putting it on the ticker of the credit card or going into debt for it on a really high finance situation and putting yourself under all that stress, but it made you look like you were successful, but yet it was hollow.
I think, Josh, look at the greatest sports teams. You know, Michael Jordan during the 90s. You know, they won how many championships? Why didn't they rest on their laurels? Tom Brady, you know, 9 Super Bowl appearances, wins 6. I just watched this incredible show on Apple TV called Dynasties about the New England Patriots. So I think the thing is that if you are motivated by that success, that watch, that car, that holiday, that thing that, you know, you think you've hit your peak, you've actually plateaued. So the champions are the ones that rise up and go, what's next? Because I've already clocked that level. I need to get to level 2 now or level 3 or level 10. And if you're Alex Phillips, I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that. Have that moment, celebrate it, and then readjust, reset your coordinates, your GPS targets, and off you go again.
The interesting things around peaks is also understanding the stages of growth. So the traditional thing in the sales environment is someone goes from agent to maybe a small team to a team of teams to ultimately, you know, being a business partner, maybe even being a business owner. And then how each of those, they all have different challenges, right? And you know, sometimes it's about getting into a position that you've got something that's going to challenge you mentally and emotionally and really pull out the best in you. But you've got to be careful for what you wish for. What are your thoughts about that?
I completely agree. I mean, the reason why I don't list and sell as a business owner and a principal is because I'm really good at what I do and I understand what my swim lane is, and my business partners are really good at what they do and they understand what their swim lanes are. I think if you want to try and be a jack of all trades, you'll be a master of none. And the most successful businesses and people that I've seen is that they have this dedicated focus to one or maximum 2 things that they're exceptional at, that no one else can replicate, that's unique and proprietary to them. And I think that there's different stages of growth. So, for example, you're right, you spoke about being an associate to an agent, to building your own team, etc. It's what new skill can you learn? Okay, and one of those things could be, you know what, I've never sold sites, or I've never had to do a feasibility study, or I've never had to, you know, do off-the-plan project marketing, or I've never had to. And so for us, it's also designing how you're going to grow personally and not necessarily in that linear traditional model, which is, you know what, I go from this to that, because once you get there, and I've got business partners that have been business owners and they thought that this would be the pinnacle of their career, and what ended up happening for some of them was it wasn't what they thought it was, and it actually had an adverse impact on their life. And that's why they've been able to merge into our group today, because it's given them the ability to be really good at what they do, and it gives them all that time and energy back. So I think that phrase, be careful what you wish for, can be kind of changed and altered into design the game that you're trying to win of life.
Experiences that rapidly shaped you.
Con, I remember that we were there in like the career planning part of, you know, the end of school. And we were there and they were like, oh, okay, cool. And so like we spent 30 minutes on deciding what we're going to do for our futures. And the teacher up the front of that room had said to everyone, you know what, like if you do everything right and you go to university and you get a degree, you can earn $40,000 a year. And I was like, my mind was blown. I'm in regional Australia. I think my dad's top tier property manager was getting paid $32,500 a year. It's usually whatever a Holden Commodore was basically what the wage was for the property manager. And I was like, 40 grand. Wow. And then, like, literally, I then started to hold this conversation. Well, what's the difference versus somebody who then goes to write $1 million? And it took some time. I was at a dinner once, and this particular individual got everyone to go around the room and to reveal how much debt they had. And, and the first person goes 500 grand. I'm like, wow. The next person goes $1 million. I'm like, wow. So there's a guy at the table, he's got 16 million. I was like, wow. We got to another guy's like 35 million. I was like, how do you even write that number?
What dinner was this?
Well, you went there. But the interesting conversation of what we learned very, very quickly was it was all about perception of money.
Yes.
And then there was a little saying that was said to me, it's not about writing the million, it's learning what it takes to provide $1 million worth of service.
Yeah, I love that.
And then it was like, it's how do I go to provide $1 million and some worth of service in the way that I got to help with people. And that changed my whole perspective because it's not prospecting, it's service.
Yeah.
It's not trying to get a win listing, it's about trying to serve people. It's about understanding that if someone lists with a competitor, they will undersell their property because I fundamentally know what it is that we will do to maximize that sale price. And then there was that old school, Zig Ziglar quote that if you help enough people get what they want, then they'll help you get what you want.
That's 100% true, right?
And the interesting thing about it is that, like, you've got a great little story about behaving like a CEO. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, my first sales manager was an incredible human being that taught me a lot of the foundation principles and values that I have today as a sales leader. And he sat me down. I was 19 years old. I had a goatee. I had a gold hoop earrings, blonde tips in my hair, and he said, "What do you want to? What would be kind of like the pinnacle of your career?" I said, "Oh, geez, I'd love to be the CEO of a company one day." And he just looked at me blankly and he goes, "Well, why don't you behave like the CEO today?" And that was an aha moment. Earrings came out, shaved the goatee off, blonde tips came off, and from that day I wore a suit and tie. And I always look at that as kind of like the behavior and the actions are what led to my career development and progression. But what's really important is that when you start to get that sense of feeling about where you want to go, the direction that you want to take, then behaviors and actions follow, and that kind of, gives you that momentum and energy into your career.
Something that's changing your view.
I'm Zig Ziglar, and I'm CEO, and I mean you at the top. When I was 6 years old, and I remember jumping into my dad's car, and that's what we listened to all the time. It was interesting because my dad was an absolutely avid listener to trainer. He was so interested in training and so interested in wanting to learn and wanting to grow. And, ultimately we had the most phenomenal cassette tapes in that car. We never listened to music. We never listened to the radio. We didn't listen to the footy. What we listened to was Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn and some of the absolute greats. And it got me to start thinking that, ultimately they used to go and call it the university on wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah, like literally you get in that car, you use that as the university on wheels. And now this is the interesting thing. There's a lot of people that want to command your attention with podcasts and all of those things. It doesn't mean that they're all necessarily great, but the lesson is that literally find that one thing that you want to go all in on and make it a decision to become an absolute student of the game. And I remember I was in a position that one day Dad had said to me, "Hey, we've got this contract that need to be signed." This is well before all the digital signing technologies came out. He said, "Mate, I need to go to a little place called Myrtleford." And Myrtleford was the place where all of the old school Italians grew all of the tobacco in Australia.
Yeah.
So they were very, very wealthy. They'd made a lot of money in farming and all those things. And we had to go and sign up this contract. And so I got in the car and before I went, Dad said, "Hey, choose one of the cassette series off the wall and listen to it on your way up and listen to it on your way back." So I'm going to spend 3 hours in the car return trip. So naturally I pulled out, and I think it was Brian Tracy's The Science of Self-Confidence. And the person that left the office that day was not the person that returned.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that it was just so I can't even tell you what was in that audio at the time, but I can tell you that literally that decision to go all in, that it flicked a switch, it did those things. And there's a great quote by Sam Zell, you can just never tell when you're going to learn something. But you know what? It turns out that if you turn up to more of the environments where the teaching's happening, then I bet you probably will. What are your thoughts there about using your car as the university on wheels?
There's no excuses, Josh. You've got podcasts, you've got YouTube, you've got Instagram, Facebook, you've got audiobooks. You've got more access to more information than you've ever had in your life. And I think there was a quote, and please don't quote me, it was something like, there is more information that's been created in the last decade than what there has been in the last 2,000 years. And so if you kind of look at that, you can become an expert on anything. I had to put a fly screen up the other day. Mate, I am not I am not a handyman. I YouTubed it, I looked at it, I did it, and it worked. So it's incredible what you can learn if you make that decision to actually want to go pro.
So I've had a lot of challenges in life, and what I do is I go to Amazon.com and I just type those challenges in. And so, like, for example, I thought that meetings suck. So I typed in meetings suck into Amazon, and guess what? There was a book called Meetings Suck by Cameron Herold. It had great ratings and reviews. I read it. Now I have the best meetings of my career. So I had a quick look at it the other day, and on my Amazon account, it's like something like 650 books I've bought over the course of the last 15 years.
Wow.
And the interesting thing about that is I can probably tell you the best 20 out of that are actually really worthwhile reading, but it's taken me all of those to actually find the ones that one book there was the foundational pillar of a whole set of ideas that became really, really important for a successful life, for great routines and understanding that. And it was interesting. I was just yesterday, I had the chance to work with a great young lady in our industry, and she's working as an assistant in a team, and real estate's her first career out of school. And when I'd first met her, I thought that she might have been 24, 25, but it turns out she's just 18. And I was like, wow, so she presents really well for her age. And I said to her, hey, look, if I could give you a book that would change the course of your life, would you read it? Nah, I don't like reading. And it just, and you could just feel that moment. I was like, oh, really? Because like literally you've got everything that you need, but now you're going to need to get new behaviors. And then I asked her, I said, hey, did they teach you everything at school that you're going to need to know for the rest of life? She's like, no. I said, so how are you going to learn things? She goes, I'm just going to hang out with people. I said, geez, I hope you're hanging out with the right ones, because the interesting conversation is that literally I know that for $15 to $20, you can go and buy a book online, and you can actually be in a position that ultimately you can read and become a master of that skill in probably under 3, 4, 5 hours. And she said to me, she goes, yeah, but like, I just don't like books. Can I read romance ones? I'm like, look, you probably could, but I don't think it's going to teach you the particular skill. I said to her, hey, what I got to tell you, you just haven't found the right book yet.
Yeah.
So I remember there was a book called Cut to the Chase. Well, there is a book called Cut to the Chase by Stuart Levine. And I'm actually in a position that naturally I thought, okay, I'm going to go and read this book. It's 99 chapters over 99 pages. And so you get yourself in a position that then you go out there and you go and read that particular book. And it was an absolutely awesome book to go and read. And it changed the course of how I thought about things. And it was just great to really get people into that moment. And then naturally I was then in a position that I thought, you know what, that is such a great book. I'm going to go to New York and meet the author. So literally, a guy by the name of Stuart Levine, I'm showing you the photo right now.
I can see him, yeah.
I literally sent a message to Stuart and said, I've read your book. I've recommended it to hundreds, if not thousands of people. I'm coming to New York. Let's go for lunch.
Oh, wow.
And Stuart Levine said to me, he goes, no one has ever reached out to me as an author and asked me to go for lunch. I said, well, I'm asking you, so let's do it. He goes, all right.
Done.
So we had this great lunch in New York. We had a really good opportunity for 90 minutes. We got to hang out with each other. It was really fascinating, some of the things that you learned during the course of that conversation. And what it made me realize is that in life is that if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
And just because they wrote a book doesn't mean they're not human and they're not touchable, and everyone is in a position they want to help other people to grow. So if you're in a position that you ask the question, chances are you can get in front of some amazing people that can change the course of how you think and the type of person you become.
Absolutely, Josh. Agree with that. And for $9 a month, I think it is, Spotify Premium, you can have every audio book under the sun, and there's no excuse not to be able to go and research that topic. It might be, you know what, I'm an introvert living in an extroverted body, or I might be, lacking skill sets in X, Y, or Z. You can actually do that self-education and help you drive a better career.